Good evening, everyone. This is Ramsey Hanhan. Thank you so much for attending this. Thank you, Zainab, for organizing this and for the group. It is quite an honor to be invited. I'm going to start with a reading from the book. It's called Fugitive Dreams, Chronicles of Occupation and Resistance. I published that in October last year. And I'm going to be talking about the truth, about children. There are many topics in the book about Palestine, but I want to focus on children today, on censorship, what I would call liberating the narrative, saying what we want, and about empowerment. And since I was in Palestine on October 7, I was visiting. I'm going to talk about my experience there and perhaps read you a poem. So this is my daughter. When I took her to Palestine in 2015, she was 5 years old. And I talk about that in the book. I'm going to read you one passage. The closest we got to Jerusalem yet was the hill at Ramallah's outskirts, where I took the 5-year-old Ksenia to see it from above the wall. She asked to visit the city. I explained that the Israelis, whom she had encountered at the bridge, blocked us from going there. That night before bedtime, she approached me whispering something. I leaned in and asked her to repeat it. She whispered again, with eyes as wide as when I told her about seeing a fox on the trail. Tell me more about the Israelis. I immediately understood the weight of my undertaking. Her attitude towards them will be shaped by mine. Not only what I tell her, but what tone I use and how I behave. Am I angry or fearful? Vengeful, perhaps? Apathetic? Ignorant? I want to tell her the truth, but how to stop its bloodied shadow from staining the course of her life? Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
So, the truth. In Arabic, the word for truth is called al-haqiqa, and it's intimately related to the concept of legal rights, haqq, and to the verb, we attain, nuhaqqiq, we achieve. We literally, it means we make it true. So truth is central to the Palestinian people's attainment of their long denied rights, as it is in other liberation struggles. So what kind of truth interests us here? Imagine this scene that you see in front of you, a soldier pointing a gun at a child. Unfortunately, in Palestine, that scene is a daily image that is very common over there. I call it an obscene. And you might ask yourself, what do you see here? Well, it depends on what you're interested in. A journalist, for example, might wonder, what just happened to lead to that situation. The historian will want to dig deeper into the origins and causes. The lawyer may look at international law and wonder why is the soldier there, and so on. Depending on what your profession is, you might look at the same picture differently. But here, what I'm interested in is the basic naked truth. A soldier pointing a gun at a child. It's what I call the poetic truth. The whole story of Palestine is concentrated at the crosshairs. You have a settler colonial entity that is built on dispossession and erasure, and they try to erase Palestine from the land, from the map, and from the history. So such an entity naturally demands that children be targets. So what I aim to do is freeze such a moment and portray its revolting ugliness the emotions of the child, the slight tremble in the finger touching the trigger, the horror of the onlookers. A soldier pointing a gun at a child. Now, look at the title. Look what. It's the same picture, but I changed the wording. Now it says a child facing a gun unarmed. So as you can see, the same situation, I just changed the subject of the sentence. I make the child from the object to the subject. And that child is turned from a victim to a hero. My point here is the narrative matters. Alongside the history and the politics, it is crucial to communicate how it feels to be a Palestinian, to make that experience palpable to someone who's far away, who doesn't know anything about Palestine. So, Fugitive Dreams, the book, is a story of Sumud. Samir is on a lifelong quest, and he wants to understand what does it mean to be a Palestinian. And central to the book is the concept of Sumud, being steadfast, persisting, continuing to exist on the land, despite all the obstacles that Israel puts in place to kick Palestinians out. So let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me. And I want to read you another anecdote. Samir, the narrator of Fugitive Dreams, has no country. He was born under occupation, what I call in the book on the wrong side of the border. When he goes to the US in the 1980s, he's made to write stateless. And when people ask him, where are you from? He finds that challenging in America. I'm going to read you a short passage here. 2 years later, when I came back for school, I tried a different answer. Palestine. Where is that? In the Middle East, occupied by Israel, in the news every day. Oh, yeah. Soon, a friend of theirs walks by, and my new acquaintance is eager to introduce us. Hey, Brad, let me introduce you to Samir from Pakistan. Or, so what do you think about relations with India? The West Bank rang no bells. Only after 2000, year 2000 did Ramallah sound familiar. So if I cared to answer correctly, I had to give people a short lesson in history and geography, invoking the Middle East, Yasser Arafat, Jesus, and sometimes Bethlehem. At some point, I stopped caring. Where are you from? Pakistan. And, Samir jokes about that. But in reality, it's no joke. Being without a country is deeply traumatic. I'm going to share the screen again here. Let's see here.
You can see it, yes.
So moving on to the next slide, there's this quote. This is a stone wall. This is a traditional stone wall. They're all over the West Bank. And the farmers use it they've been built for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they're used to take the mountainous region and terrace it so that people can plant. Since Palestine is real to me, that's the country of my birth. Occupied, perhaps, yet real enough to be touched, along with the stones of the Sinasil, inhaled with the April wildflowers, and tasted in the za'atar, Palestine's blend of thyme and spices. Today, we are talking about the enormous number of children killed in Gaza. Thousands. Very sad. I've been crying every day. But what strikes me is, how do we even quantify the trauma that's inflicted on the million other children who survive this and who are enduring this horror every day and who are going to carry that with them for the rest of their lives?
Yes, we can hear you, sorry.
Yeah, Fugitive Dreams begins with a 3-year-old Samir. the child, he's hiding under his dad's desk while Israeli soldiers searched their home. And that was in the mid-1970s. There was no Hamas, no Hezbollah. Iran was Israel's ally. So when you hear the Israeli trolls online say Hamas, 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 well, the occupation was there 30 years before Hamas. And that's something to keep in mind. The oppression was there from the beginning. The people who are fighting with Hamas today, 20-year-olds in Gaza, they experienced 6 wars before this one. Their homes were bombed 6 times over their short 18 years of life. So the book talks about my own experience during the first Intifada, which was the first uprising against the occupation in 1987 to 1993. I lived during the first 2 years of that before coming to the US. And I talk about how the schools were closed, how we went on protests, throwing stones, soldiers shooting at us. And I write about checkpoints, being stopped and ID'd, always under suspicion for speaking Arabic or looking different. Travel, how we get searched for 4 hours at every border. How in the 70s they used to do a detailed body search, make us take off our clothes down to our underwear. And it seemed that their sole purpose was to psychologically dominate us. And for a child going through all of this before they're even 10 years old, that's very traumatic. So the loss was not only about the place, was about the self. You know, in addition to losing Palestine, Palestinians are losing their own identity, their own belonging, their own sense of being human. So this is what the occupation looked like. This is from October 3 this year. This was just a few days when the Israelis were saying everything was peaceful until Hamas attacked. So it was October 3. And I was in the old city of Al-Khalil, Habra, which is in the West Bank. And you had hundreds of soldiers on the streets of the old city, moving, standing at every corner in groups of 5 or 6. And the kids that live there, they see those soldiers every day, they run between them. Anytime anything can happen, a soldier could get upset, and they have those big guns that they're carrying, and they could shoot somebody. So the first part of the book starts from home, from Samir as a child. He can look outside the window. This is a fig tree in Ramallah. And he grows up in Palestine under these conditions. This is what Ramallah used to look like in 1985, a small town. You have snow in the winter. And in 2020, it's grown quite a bit. Its growth is actually unnatural because every Palestinian town in the West Bank is surrounded by this wall that prevents it from expanding. And so those cities are rapidly growing up, very narrow streets, taller buildings. So during the first Intifada, the schools are closed for 2 years, and Samir's parents decide to send him to the USA to finish his education. And eventually he ends up staying there, but he keeps visiting Palestine every few years. And his biggest impression is how quickly the land is changing. Every time he goes, he feels more of a stranger. He feels dislocated. The place doesn't look the same anymore. Talks about strangulation, suffocation, invisibility. And for him, you know, sumud means being on your land, but he's in exile. He's living in the USA. What does sumud mean to him? What does resistance to this occupation mean to him if he's not living in Palestine? I'm going to show you just very few pictures of some of the things that are there. These are settlements, Israeli settlements. I call them stolenments because it's a more accurate term. The Israelis came to the West Bank in 1967 and just took land from farmers, took land from people, just built houses wherever they wanted. So these are not lands that they obtained legally. And you see here Psagot, this is Ramallah in the foreground. On the background is a small settlement. They built it in the 1980s on top of this hill, and it overlooks a lot of Ramallah. It overlooks my old school, and you could see the Palestinian town is kind of random. The buildings are different shapes and sizes, and it's very organic. This is a city that grew over centuries. And you look at the settlement, every house looks the same. Every building looks like it's built overnight according to a master plan. So when we talk about the role of design, design is very much at play in occupation. The map of what the West Bank should look like was laid out 50 years ago, and they're following the same plan. They're just building more and more in the places that were already designed. On the left, you see an aerial view. You have Palestinian villages that are, again, looking organic. The buildings follow the roads, follow the contours of the mountain. And then in that circle is a small settlement, a stolenment. And you could see the roads are like geometric patterns. The houses are arranged very regularly. And on the bottom is another stolenment in the west side of the West Bank. And this one looks almost like a big city. It has high rises, and they're expanding the roads that get to it. And they were doing this on this picture is from October 5, 2 days before October 7th. The Israelis were busy expanding and building more settlements to occupy more of our land. So we cannot forget that the occupation, the violence of the occupation is far more systematic but quiet compared to the violence of, a small attack or a Hamas attack or a shooting or something like that. The violence of the occupation itself, even if they don't kill anybody, it's ongoing. It's every second, every minute of the day for 50 years and more. Checkpoints and walls. On the left is a checkpoint in the middle of the old city of Hebron. This is the wall near Bethlehem. That's the wall near Jerusalem. Again, these pictures are from October 1, October 3, October 5. That last week before Hamas attacked. If you're a Palestinian living in the West Bank, you can't travel on your land. If you want to go from Bethlehem to Ramallah, you have to cross 2 checkpoints or take a very long route to Jericho, east, then north, then west. It takes you 4 hours instead of the half hour it would have taken you to go from Bethlehem through Jerusalem to Ramallah. So, coming to the US, Samir wanted to talk about that, but he found that every time he tried to talk about Palestine, he gets silenced. And I talk about in chapter 16 several incidents that happened in 2003 that show what kind of censorship and silencing that Palestinian activists experience, especially in the USA. So I talk about spying on mailing lists. They had an Israeli ambassador visit campus, and they prevented us from asking questions. But the one that's most chilling to me is book reviews. So one time I liked a book that I read. I thought I'm going to go and review it on Amazon. So I went on Amazon and left a review for the book. Now that book was about Palestine. 2 days later, my review disappeared. I asked Amazon, what's going on? They said, well, somebody complained, your review is against our policies. So I rewrote it, put it back. The next day, somebody complained, they pulled my review. And it turns out, I write about that in detail in the book. It turns out that they had a group of people that all their job is to monitor reviews of books on Amazon that are either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. And they want to make sure that the pro-Israel books get good reviews and the pro-Palestine books get bad reviews. And if there's any review that they don't like, they will complain about it until it's removed. And so that was what's going on in 2003. Now, in 2023, it's much more large scale. Instead of people on mailing lists using email, they have automated software to do that. They have AI. They have agreements with the social media companies. About a week after October 7th, I used to post on LinkedIn, and I had 6,500 followers. And a week after October 7th, my account was disabled. I couldn't go in. I appealed it twice. They would not let me in. They say I'm violating their rules, but they're not very specific about what I did. And I have now a blog on Medium, and you can go there and read my articles. I reposted the same things about October 7th that I put on LinkedIn. There's nothing wrong. I'm not advocating violence. I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is telling the truth about Palestine. So now it's really insane, because if you want to boycott Israel, you could go to jail. You could be fined up to $1 million in some places in the US. Just yesterday, they had a hearing against, they brought 3 or 4 university presidents for allowing pro-Palestine groups to just express themselves freely on campus. The presidents had to be grilled in front of Congress. So this is really alarming. If you want to get to peace, you have to talk about the truth. And if you can't talk about the truth, then you can't go anywhere. So my book is really about rejection of victimhood. As Palestinians, we are very often portrayed as victims. And that idea is problematic for us because victims never really win. And when you look at Israelis, they go through the same process. They're still feeling victimized from the Holocaust. And they use that idea of their victimhood to go and victimize other people. So what I say is I choose not to be defined by my traumas. I am far greater, deeper than that. The pain inflicted upon me by others binds me not. For my own well-being, I need to reaffirm, I am not a victim. We are not simply anti-them. To be truly free is to be free to define ourselves as we want, to live our lives in the ways to which we individually aspire. We each individually aspire. Despite the abuse and all the difficulties, obstacles, and walls they hurl in my path, I am still here. And as we learned in the school of the Intifada, a person who stands up for their rights is no victim. That's what we have in Palestine today. We have people standing up for their rights. They're tired of being under occupation, being under siege for so many years. What got me in trouble on LinkedIn was I wrote on October 7th that the people who breached the border, they were not going into Israel. They were not invading. They were going back to their homes, because 80% of the refugees who are living in Gaza, they used to live in Yafa, which is now Tel Aviv. They used to live in Ascalon, now Ashkelon. Israel in 1948 kicked them out of their homes, took over their homes, and sent them to Gaza as refugees, where they lingered in refugee camps, very miserable conditions, for 75 years. So they're not invading, they're going back to their homes. They're legally entitled, every refugee in the world, by the Declaration for Human Rights, is entitled to go back to their homes. So my conclusion is that in the face of their attempts to dehumanize me, my best means of resistance is to assert my humanity. You can find more information about my book on my website. My hope really is that Fugitive Dreams inspires others to write their stories. And you can follow my blog on the current events on Gaza at this URL. My LinkedIn account is disabled currently. And I can have, maybe Zainab can help me email this information to you. You can also, you're welcome to read the editorial reviews on my website.
Yes, we've.
October 7th, a little bit more. I want to read you an excerpt from my blog and a poem. How much time do I have?
It's up to you. You can go on. You have time.
Okay, good. So I want to read this from October 9th. Paragraph. The din of airplanes. I was in Ramallah at the time. Ramallah is in the West Bank. It's very close to Jerusalem. So it's far away from most of the fighting, but we could still hear things. The din of airplanes has not stopped since early last night. It is now afternoon, and all I hear are airplanes high up that I cannot see. A bomb could fall at any minute, on Gaza or here, or anywhere, that the cowardly Israeli pilots are ordered to drop. Sirens break out here and there. Heard a round of gunfire about midnight last night, coming from the south end of Ramallah. A little later, the news came of the murder of 3 Palestinians at the Columbia checkpoint. Another sleepless night of American-made Israeli terror. In the span it took me to type one paragraph, another sortie could be heard above. And that was my 1 week after October 7th in Palestine. I could not sleep because immediately on the evening of October 7th, Israel started the bombing of Gaza. And for the first few days, the flight path went directly over Ramallah. So we could hear every sonic boom of the airplanes that were going. And it was very painful because you know that those airplanes were carrying bombs and that they're going to go to Gaza and drop them. And for every bomb, the whole building is going to collapse the way we see on TV from previous bombings of Gaza. And we know that there aren't this many Hamas targets. They're bombing civilians. We know that families, children are going to be sitting in their homes and they don't know anything. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes after I hear the plane, this bomb is going to drop over them and they don't even know it. And it's really painful. Those flights were going on every 10 minutes. You hear a flight. At night, they step it up. They go every 5 minutes. And I can do the math. How many buildings aren't you done killing people? So I already knew from day one that it's a genocide was going on. But you turn on the news, in the Western media, there's nothing. CNN, BBC, all they're talking about is the Israeli victims, and it's complete blackout on Gaza for that first week. And that gave them cover to do a lot of this killing. And So I'm going to read you a poem that describes, I wrote this the day after I came back to the US with all my impressions still fresh from my mind. It's called A Rose Among Gods of Stone. I know how many bombs they dropped on Gaza. I counted the flights overhead. Took a walk with my brother on Sunday afternoon. Day 2, looking at the stone towers of Ramallah, I tuned to the hum in the sky and wondered, what if one were felled? Like the flattened apartment blocks of Gaza, what if the stone gods collapsed? Are we born to be wanderers, to roam where God roamed, where olive trees still cling to the earth, and the thorns and nettle and sabr lure the bees? That buzz overhead, not bees, but the rat of the golden calf of history, blessed by gods with hearts of stone. We reach a road deserted but for speeding police cars. Sagot and the Kalandia Gate beyond. No cover from a drive-by. We turn back. I wander again and look at the sky as I go to bed, unable to sleep, not knowing if I'll wake up. Anything can happen. Will I see my daughter again? It's gunshots this late night from the deserted road, then sirens. 3 Palestinians killed at Kalandia. Sirens and silence. Airplanes overhead. I know how many bombs they dropped. 1 million children live in Gaza. 3 thuds the next afternoon. Explosions somewhere. TV says a rocket hit Bitar. A stolen, I recall. Illegal. Shadowing Batir. Batir, where my daughter and I hiked among terraces of eggplants 4 years earlier, where she enjoyed the Ain, water gushing from barren rock, a rose among stone gods. By day 3, I stopped caring for sirens or gunshots, walked to the old city, deserted, another strike day for the 3 killed in Kalandia, now 4. Murals of children playing, a rose among stone gods, a red rose, a fire rose among stone gods. The stones rose, the people rose against gods of stone. The people arose. Thank you so much.